morning again, everyone. I'm Jim Silkenat, an officer and director of the World Justice Project, and I'm a lawyer in New York City. This program is a very timely and important one concerning practical programs to advance the rule of law. A key component of the World Justice Forum is the exploration of practical ideas to advance the rule of law, led by people from different countries, different professions, and walks of life. How do we strengthen the rule of law in our local communities? That's our task. Since its inception, the World Justice Project has helped to incubate and support more than 90 practical, locally based programs in support of the rule of law in 60 countries. In this particular session, we're going to discuss several of the World Justice Project's in-country rule of law programs and the opportunities that are available during this particular forum to explore new rule of law ideas that all of us may be able to pursue when we return home. First, we're going to have Radha Friedman, Director of Programs at the World Justice Project, give a general overview of the kinds of projects we've been able to support. And then I'll introduce the leaders of several of our specific projects to go into more detail about the problems, opportunities, practicalities of running those kinds of projects. So Radha, we'll start with you, please.
Great. Thank you very much, Jim. I will be brief, but I do have an important role in explaining to you what you will be doing over the next few days of the forum. And I wanted to just reiterate, we didn't invite you here only to talk about the rule of law. We want to engage you in practical solutions, real steps that each of us can take. In the last session, the question was posed, we know about the problems, what are we going to do about some of the solutions? This is your opportunity. The World Justice Forum is designed to be interactive and multidisciplinary. It's about connecting with one another and also with those that we don't often have the opportunity to interact with. It's about actively creating the kind of world that we all want to live in. In a moment, we're going to hear from 4 individuals from all different parts of the world to share their real experiences about what it looks like to create real-world solutions to advance the rule of law in different countries. And they will also share a little bit about some of the bumps in the road along the way. But I want to emphasize that these programs represent your ideas. These are not ours. Our role is simply to provide the platform and the resources to help you create and implement these ideas. I just want to take a moment and explain how these practical program opportunities are going to be integrated into the forum over the next few days, and in particular, what will happen immediately following this session. So today, immediately following this session, you're going to break up into small working groups by topic. You can join any group that interests you or that aligns with your work. And this is your opportunity to share your ideas and your potential solutions to improve the rule of law and get feedback from your peers and coaching and advice. I know we've been emailing all of you during the weeks and months leading up to the forum saying, bring your ideas. This is your moment. Tomorrow, you'll have the opportunity to learn some practical skills that were intentionally designed to help your rule of law work be most effective. So for example, how do you communicate complex rule of law issues to different audiences? How do you do monitoring and evaluation of rule of law programs? On Thursday, at the closing plenary, a handful of selected participants are going to take the stage right here and share their ideas for new program ideas to advance the rule of law. And all of you are going to vote on the idea that you think best deserves to win $10,000 in seed funds to implement that idea. So a little bit like Rule of Law Idol. But to be eligible for that, you have to attend the working program sessions today. If you've attended our past events, you may notice that this model looks a little bit different than it has in the past. Why? Earlier this year, we stepped back to evaluate the collective impact of our programs that we've helped incubate and to examine our approach. Over the last 9 years, the World Justice Project has helped to incubate, as Jim said, and support 90 programs in 61 countries. Hundreds of ideas have been explored, but these were the programs that were supported and actually implemented. And they were about a wide range of rule of law challenges all over the world that engaged non-traditional leaders, many of whom had never really considered their work in a rule of law context before. For example, In Haiti and Kenya and Sierra Leone and Brazil too, I think, local street musicians learn to successfully protect their intellectual property rights. Working hand in hand with contract lawyers and executives from the entertainment industry, these artists are learning the basics of intellectual property laws to protect themselves from exploitation. And as a result of this program, the Peace Tones has grown the number of countries where they work, and many of the artists that they work with are now investing back in their communities. They've built a recording studio for local artists, they've developed a foundation to support education. They're really investing this back into the community. In Kuwait, a local NGO helped protect the rights of domestic workers by working with both employment agencies and with employers on common labor standards. And that program has since been adopted by the ILO, the International Labor Organization, and is being used as a model throughout the entire MENA region. In Argentina, software engineers, they called themselves hackers, designed a mobile app to help improve government transparency. Through this program, Democracy OS, or Democracy Open Source, citizens can use this app to reveal how their elected officials are voting. Previously, they had to go to courthouses to find out that kind of information, and now it's right at their fingertips. And they're using it to debate proposed legislation. As a result, this app is now being used not only in Argentina, but also in Mexico and in Tunisia to gather feedback from the public on public policy in real time. And in Nepal, as you're going to hear shortly from Shyam, survivors of sex trafficking are becoming trained as paralegals, and they're working alongside local police in the community. As a result of this program, many more women and girls are coming forward and reporting these kinds of crimes, which is a major feat in a country where there's low trust in the police and few crimes of gender-based violence are ever reported. Now they know that there's somebody sitting outside the police station who looks like them, who shared their experiences, who will believe them. In sum, there is no blueprint model for the rule of law. And taken in total, we found that the World Justice Project's relatively modest investment of $1.7 million over 9 years and 90 different programs has resulted in major legal reforms, sometimes a national criminal justice reform, new long-term coalitions and multidisciplinary partnerships, and nearly half of these programs have been replicated in other countries or expanded. We also found 3 important findings. Finding number 1, through our quantitative analysis, the data show that programs that involved non-traditional actors were more successful than programs that operated within the typical boundaries of the formal justice system. So in other words, when we engaged engineers and journalists and athletes, many programs created great impact by tapping sources of knowledge not usually associated with the law. And just working with a greater diversity of people proved to be the most important factor when we analyze the data and what can help achieve maximum impact for rule of law programs. The second finding, innovative programs outperformed all the other models. So we found that programs employing an innovative model such as the arts or mobile technology were more successful than some of the more traditional models we may be used to, such as standard training seminars or desk research. And finally, small efforts really do make a big difference. And I know that some people might dismiss small programs as a drop in the bucket in a world full of big programs and big grants, but often a small seed grant to test a new idea can be a game changer. It can lead to nationwide reforms. We've seen it. For a small grassroots organization or a scrappy startup, a small grant can really go a long way and can be a significant investment. For a large organization, it can allow for innovation and provide just the right support to test a new concept. And many of our grantees have told us that early funding from the World Justice Project helped them attract new donors because it gave them credibility and leverage and visibility they didn't have. So in this way, a small program really can make a big difference in advancing the rule of law. The message that we hope you will take away is that every one of us can do something to advance the rule of law where we are, and a great idea can come from anywhere. We're very proud of the impact we've seen so far, and we look forward to more great work to come. So with that, please join me in welcoming this panel to share their stories of what it looks like to do real-world rule of law solutions on the ground.
Radha, thank you. Let me note at the beginning that hidden somewhere during this program will be a hint about how to successfully apply for one of these grants. So be paying attention to each of the speakers as we go through this. That should have produced a laugh, but didn't. Let me introduce our other panelists now. Sreerupa Chowdhury is co-founder of Law Farm. and CEO of the Bribe Hackers Project in India. This project provides a pro bono legal helpline for reporting and resolving bribe requests in India. Reinford Mwangonde is Executive Director of Citizens for Justice in Malawi. This group is aimed at providing pro bono legal assistance to the huge number of detainees being held in illegal pretrial detention in Malawi. At my far left, Caitlin Fisher is co-founder of the Guerreiras project in Brazil, which combats gender discrimination and sexual harassment of women in Brazil, particularly in sports, especially in soccer, where Caitlin played professionally. And last, Shyam, Pokharel, director of the SASANE project in Nepal, which is a paralegal training program in Nepal for victims of human trafficking. Now, I'm going to start with a question for Reinford, but I want each of our panelists to feel free to jump in with a comment or a thought comparing what the issues that you faced, problems you faced, maybe with comments from our speakers. Reinford, let me start with you. Many programs that work to improve access to justice focus on bringing lawyers and clients to a court to resolve the problem. Your program, Camp Courts, does the opposite and brings the courts to the people. What led you to that approach?
Well, the first thing is that in the Malawian context, we have got a legal aid department. So the legal aid is supposed to get money or funding from the government. Half the time, the government doesn't have the support. And in the process, you've got a lot of people that have been detained or incarcerated because they don't understand the knowledge about how to apply for bail. So what we do is we go out to judiciary and ask judiciary to go in the prisons, go to camp courts, they go in prison. We do a screening of who is a petty offender, somebody who stole a cow, they stole a bicycle, and then use that process to allow these people to get out of prison. Because a lot of our prisons are congested as a result of having petty offenders detained in prisons.
Do you have any sense of the numbers of people that need help?
Well, as I speak to you now, the last numbers I've seen, you've got over 200% of prison congestions in a lot of our prisons. But I can give you an example of the project that we did, is that we are able to release about 1,080 prisoners from people that stole a goat, a bicycle, a cow, being jailed for 5 years. And because of the colonial history in Malawi, the penal code, cows and bicycles were symbols of social status. So the law says that if you steal a cow or a bicycle, you spend about 3 to 5 years in jail. And these are done at the local level. These are magistrate courts. Right. But now the thing is that it takes government, or it does cost our government about 3,000 to 5,000 kwacha to maintain somebody in prison, which is about $5 to $7. It's about $5 a day. Somebody who steals a car worth about $100, and somebody who steals a bicycle worth about $45 or $50, they end up spending 3 years in jail. So it does cost government a lot of money. So when you go in these prisons to try to take these people out, we saved our government a lot of money. When we did the number crunches, 1,080 people saved our government almost $7.9 million, equivalent in dollars. In kwachas, it was about 7 billion kwachas. It's a lot of money. Wow. Yes.
Very, very impressive. Let me turn now to Caitlin. You've taken your success as a football, soccer player and used it to win on a different playing field, to raise awareness about women's labor rights and equal pay. When did you first begin to think about using your sport to make a difference for women and girls' rights? When did that occur for you?
So we started working on this 2010. I was playing for Santos, professional football in Brazil, one of the biggest men's clubs. And it came out of the experiences as women playing for Santos, where we weren't allowed to use the fields, the stadium, eat in the same cafeteria, use the laundry room. We had to wash our uniforms by hand. This very kind of blatant, explicit, in-your-face gender inequality and discrimination. And so it started with my teammates and I kind of grouping together and finding our collective voice. and sharing stories of this word preconceito, which in Portuguese is prejudice, which was always the answer for these issues of inequality, of why can't we use the stadium, preconceito? Why can't we use the buses to get to practice? Why do we have to bike, preconceito? And that was always, it always ended there. That was the period, preconceito, and then it kind of silenced us, and it silenced everyone. This was the answer. So we started saying to each other, how can we dig underneath the field? How can we look at the roots of where this word preconceito, these experiences are coming from? And then start to work our way up. Figure out how these roots of prejudice, of experiences underneath, are manifesting on the field, and how we're living these in the day-to-day as players on the field. So we really started looking at this idea of mudando cabezas, moving minds. How can we start to talk about gender norms through football? How can we start to talk about people's assumptions and deep-seated bias around women's role in society through football? And how does this manifest, and where can we take this? So kind of as a tool, really strong tool for talking about these issues. And we did not associate ourselves or know how we tied to rule of law. That was not part of this. This was about norms, gender norms. This was about bias. This was about preconceived notion. And then we started taking our stories to parents, to coaches, to administrations of clubs, federations, and doing workshops called Moving Minds, Bodies, and Fields that was really addressing these norms through our stories. But it wasn't until we started working with this engagement with World Justice Project, I cannot describe how invaluable it's been, because it really got us thinking about labor. It got us thinking about the working conditions. It got us thinking about professionalization. We were professionals, but we didn't have professional contracts. And if you look at us kind of as informal work, totally invisibilized, no health insurance, the medical benefits, we didn't have any of this, but we didn't know how to talk about this.
I know that you also played in Europe and in the US. How did the gender discrimination that you encountered in Brazil differ, or did it differ, from what you found in other places?
Yeah, it definitely differed. It was much more kind of, I grew up in the US. I played soccer Division I in college. When I was 22, I moved to Brazil to play for Santos because the women's professional league in the US had just folded. And women's soccer in the US, many of us know that it's very supported. It's seen very much as a women's game just as much as a men's game. So I hadn't experienced the same types of gender inequality in my face on a lived day-to-day basis. But at the same time, looking at issues of the women's professional league has folded and restarted 3 times. Why? Why can't it create a fan base? Why aren't people going? Why aren't people buying tickets? So this kind of under-the-surface discrimination that was there, not as blatant, not as obvious, took on a different form in Brazil, but which has led us as Guerreiras Project to look at how this manifests in other cultural contexts, and to say this whole debate now around equal pay for equal play in the US, we're also seeing this in women's hockey, we're seeing in Ireland women's national team. How do we have this debate, how we have this conversation, when people want to constantly argue that, oh, well, sport, this is based on how many fans you bring in. This is based on how much revenue you generate from the attendance at the stadium, and you don't have as many fans coming. So, and then that again puts the period on our activism. Oh, you're right. We're not quite as strong or as fast or as good, which is what we're told. And then we step back. So how can we continue to look at this in terms of labor, in terms of kind of, is this equal work? We're training the same amount of hours, the same amount of time, raising all of these questions.
Good, thank you very much. I know that you've had a connection to Pele's football club, and I thought that was a real, a wonderful connection to have. Let me turn now to Sreerupa Chowdhury. Bribe Hackers is using 21st century technology to address an ancient problem, really, dealing with corruption and bribery in daily life. What made you think of putting the internet to work on this particular issue?
All right, so I started off building a platform where people can get access to lawyers, access to legal justice. And it was at the time when I was applying for my passport that there was an inordinate delay in getting my passport because the police verification would just not be completed probably because I didn't pay a bribe. It was something that I personally faced, and I was kind of aghast that there was nothing I could actually do about it. And I really believe in the power of technology to solve problems. I believe that, age-old problems can be solved with new solutions, new techniques. So when I was building the platform for connecting people to lawyers, I thought, why not start a project as well that helps them get access to legal solutions around bribery? Because, it's illegal to ask for a bribe, but people don't really go up and report these instances because they don't know where to go. They don't know what are their legal options. I mean, even today, among all the people in India, I would say probably 1% would be actually aware of where they can actually go after they're asked for a bribe. So I said, okay, let's build a legal helpline for all these people. And in India, there was already a platform for reporting bribes of this sort. So that was already there. It was a technology-enabled platform. So I said, okay, I want to tie up with you guys, and I want to start the legal helpline on your website. So that was I Paid a Bribe. And I said, okay, you don't have a legal helpline. Let me start the legal helpline. So when a person now reports an instance of bribery on the platform, they're given an option where they're asked if they want to take it forward in a legal way, whether they want to do something about it. And for all those of them who take that option, we come into the picture and we tell them their options. We tell them how to go about it. We help them draft a complaint. In many instances, we help them forward the complaint to the relevant organization, the agency, and we take it from there.
I think it's somewhat ironic that you may have run into certain problems in setting up your organization. And dealing with the government. You want to talk about that just a bit?
Yeah, so basically when we started, we got the seed fund from World Justice Project, and we were going to set up this organization. We were very excited. We realized that the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act in India, requires you to be in operations for 3 years before you can take a grant. But this was my seed fund. So how am I supposed to show 3 years of operations? So that was kind of ironic. So what we did to get around this problem is we tied up with an organization which is working in the field of anti-corruption, which has an FCRA. So we said, why don't you partner with us? And together, we can work on this. And that's how we got the funds to start the project.
Good, good. Let me turn to Shyam now. You founded SASANE 10 years ago in 2007 to put a stop to the exploitation of girls and in human trafficking in Nepal. And you're a lawyer. How did your legal education and experience equip you to deal with that set of issues?
SASANE is the organization that lead by human trafficking survivor for human trafficking survivors. Because I'm the single person of the lawyer. I'm assisting some legal knowledge and help for these girls. And everywhere, not only Nepal, everywhere human trafficking survivors, they have a very less number they are going to get justice. And Nepal is the same situation in there. And the very few percent of the human trafficking survivors, especially is the female survivors, they are getting justice there. Due to the reason of the lack of knowledge of the legal procedure and the knowledge and the lack of respect from the society and the lack of innovations, like motivations from that society. And this reason, the survivors, they do not want to file complaint for get justice. So we decided that if we teach them to legal skill and knowledge, and they will get the certificate from the government of Nepal, then they will be file their case alone, and they will know the all legal procedure and knowledge. After that, they will be able to help for the other potential human trafficking survivors in the legal sectors. Then first, that was very hard for us to negotiate with the government of Nepal to coalition with the police. And our program is very deeply related with the police. And we are providing some 2-month theory class and the 6-month internship course with the police stations. Right. And then 2 months, the girls, they are taking the paralegal examinations preparations, and then they will sit the open competition paralegal examination. And if they pass, they will get the certificate from the government of Nepal. And then they have allowed to write every legal document within the Nepal. And now that is the success for now we have 275 certified paralegals, human trafficking survivors with us.
How much staff is required to deal with that level of participation?
We have a sort of the police station because that course is very attached with the police. Mm-hmm. In Kathmandu Valley, there is 30 police stations. We are sending 30 police girls in each police station. In Pokharel is another very popular tourist area, there is the 7 police stations. So we are sending 2 girls in each police station. In about 45 girls, we are providing paralegal training every year.
Good. Thank you. Let me turn actually to Radha now. You've been dealing with these issues for a considerable time now, and really your role is so much involved in all of the World Justice Project does. What themes do you see across these programs? What can those programs learn from each other? We've got a sampling here, but you've seen an even broader sampling, and I'm curious what connections you see.
Great question, because the programs are so different depending on the cultures and the contexts and the countries. I think that each of them represents tremendous innovation and a willingness to jump in even if the situation is unclear. And I think that's exactly the attitude that we need. I think it echoes the themes of hope that we've been hearing about from last night with Justice Ginsburg to the panel that went just before us. And I think that it's also a testament to what can happen from a small program. I just was speaking with Caitlin right before we got on stage. She's now been invited to help work with FIFA as a result of what's happened with this kind of a program. And they have not all been smooth.
FIFA has its own problems at the moment.
Yes. and none of these programs have a smooth path when you're dealing with these entrenched values and challenges in the government, but people have persisted. I think it's that spirit.
Good, good. Reinford, let me go back to you for a second. I'm intrigued by the low level of crime, the small level of crime that results in imprisonment in Malawi. Could you talk a bit more about that? Because my instinct is that that's an enormous issue for your country and for the involved in the rule of law and support for that.
Yeah, the problem is that Malawi, like a lot of African countries, we've got a huge youth population. A lot of them are unemployed. They live in rural areas, and for them, stealing a cow, stealing a bicycle is something that is very tempting. And at a local level, the traditional justice system, which has been entrusted with the traditional chiefs, doesn't have, it's not fair enough. But also it doesn't seem to work. So it ends up that people that come from the local level, from rural areas, they end up finding their way into the formal justice system. They appear before a magistrate. They don't know the law, they don't know court procedures, there's no legal aid system, or it's there but it's not functional properly because there's lack of resources. And then you end up with all this congestion of a lot of young people that are imprisoned. Again, like I said, because of the historical or the colonial background, the penal code isn't very friendly to certain type of offenses. So something that is very petty lands somebody in jail for quite a long time.
Right.
Yeah.
Sreerupa, we've talked a bit about the internet connection for your operation, and every internet startup has to overcome obstacles. What kinds of obstacles did you face with bribe hackers, and how did you deal with them? You mentioned some of the government approval issues, but just the technology involved. How did that? How did you overcome those hurdles?
Yeah, so for starters, I'm a lawyer and I have no background in technology. So it's ironic that I started a technology platform. And of course, we ran into a lot of issues when we were trying to set up the website. We had to outsource all of that work. I had to take up classes to understand coding because I realized at some point that unless you get your hands dirty, you really won't be able to take care of your own project that you've started. So those are some of the issues that I faced at the technology front. At the operational level, I mean, when you're dealing with cases of bribery, people are scared to speak up on it, right? And one of the major issues I faced is that people didn't want to go legal on something like that. They were afraid, and they were afraid to reveal their identities. And if you really want to have a formal complaint, then you have to reveal your identity. There is a whistleblower's protection, but most people think that's just on paper, and that's not real. So we had to deal with the mindset, and we're still dealing with that, which is that it's, we can't do it if you want to be anonymous. We can tell you the options, but we have to enable you to come out there and really put your complaint out there. So these are some of the challenges that we faced over time.
Caitlin, I'm interested in the women with whom you play football, how they've responded to these issues, and how they've been able to connect with women and girls in other parts of the society. Is there an educational element there? Has that been a part of what you're doing?
Yeah, a big part. So on one level, we've been working with professional female players in Brazil and doing capacity building around gender and rights. So bringing them together, sharing our stories, and then looking at how this ties to issues of labor and issues of human rights, issues of women's rights. And then with these, this certification that we do of capacity building, going out and leading these community workshops with young girls and boys and parents and coaches. So taking them out and having these conversations. So it's been really challenging. A big part has been reaching professional female players, so all of the players who we know who are friends, former teammates in our network. It's kind of a big subculture of women's football that's hyper-invisibilized, so it's not in mainstream, but we have our network, is talking about rights and talking about working conditions is very challenging because it feels to many coaches and to clubs like a threat. It also ties to some of the recent work, which Radha mentions, that we've recently, because of the work with World Justice Project, connected to the union, the football union in Brazil. And we've been trying to establish a relationship. We've been trying to figure out how to work together, and they've been supportive, and they want to incorporate us in right away. Also because we have access to all the players that they want, and they don't have that reach or the connections to be able to talk about rights. But we've been hesitant, and we've said we have to be really sensitive with how this is done, because many coaches, many clubs don't want to formalize the women's game. They don't want to make professional contracts. They don't want to put this in because it would mean then the clubs have to pay taxes for this. This becomes a formalized situation where they said there's not the revenue in the women's game to support this as formal. So as long as coaches are paying out of the pocket and it's under the table, we can keep this going. But actually, by you coming in here and saying that we want, medical insurance and all these things, we can't afford that. So it will totally end women's football in Brazil. So this idea that, and a lot of players are saying that themselves, no, we can't push for this. Vai acabar com futebol feminino. It's going to end with women's football. So it's a really sensitive line. It's also sensitive figuring out how to integrate ourselves into a football union that's been around for years and years and years working with male players and figuring out what it means to join. And it's not just add women's football in and stir. Yes, it's the same game and the same lines and the same ball, but a long history of exclusion, which has led to different conditions and cultural factors that we have to consider when we're figuring out how to integrate ourselves. So it's a very kind of delicate line, and it's going to be a slow process, but we're moving and trying to figure out how to maneuver around it as we continue to build kind of our collective voice as a movement within Guerreiras at the same time. So.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Shyam, let me ask about what you see for the future for your project. A number of rule of law leaders that I've talked with around the world have been enormously impressed by what you've achieved already and the impact it's having on the large number of women and girls that are participating already. What do you see those women and girls moving on to next? What do you see as their future? What do you dream for them for next?
That's fantastic. Now we product more paralegal got 275 is not a small amount. That high amount for human trafficking survivor girls. They are working police stations. And now we are sending them to the different remote area because girls are trafficking from the remote area to urban area. And they will be providing the access to justice and the legal counseling and the empowerment in the legal sector. But not all competitive who are sitting in the examination, they are not passing the paralegal examinations. We have a 50% pass rate because legal terminology and the legal subject is very hard to understand. Because the human trafficking survivor, they don't have a basic knowledge of legal terminology and the constitutions and the other law and the act. So now I'm little bit worried about how we can do who are not passed in the paralegal. And again, we try to go and give the paralegal examination. And also we are working Kathmandu and the Pokhara, two biggest cities. But we have left 3 and 4 biggest cities. There is also the same problem. We are not reaching there because due to the funding problem. And the internship of paralegal program is a very cost. If we rescue the girls with us, and first we need to provide the shelter, food, security, everything. And then also we do not send to them to reintegration because the girls is not empowered, not employment, and maybe there is the high risk to be trafficked. So in that sense, we need to support 1 year in the city area. And now we just apply to move to fly concept. That move to fly concept means we are sending calls in the police stations, and the first we give the priority. If you want to stay with your relatives, we are providing all cost. Not you want to stay with your friend, we are providing all cost. Not you want to stay alone, we are providing to the cost. And then our ex-paralegal girls, they are strong monitoring and evaluations. And they are looking every day routine-wise what new girls are doing there. And then they start to go 10 a.m. in police stations, and they will back 5 p.m. from the police station because office generally will be start from 10 to 5. And then they come alone with the bus and then back to private bus, and little bit they will be empowered. And they start to talk, and they know the police. And that means they start to move automatically. That is the empower. And also our legal empowerment program and paralegal program gave them to the strengthening. And slowly, if they get the paralegal certificate, they will get another skills. And after they fully employment, and they will start to fly. And that times, that will be suitable for reintegrations in society. And if you do that reintegration, that would be sustainable reintegration.
Perfect. Your emotional commitment to this is really inspiring. This program really fits perfectly into our next discussion that we'll all be moving to on the schedule, which will be about what new rule of law projects can we imagine here that we can implement back home after the end of the forum. We'll all select one of these, as Radha discussed, one of these ideas, and the World Justice Project will provide some seed funding for that at the end of the program. Just some quick housekeeping comments. Staff will guide all of us from this room to those sessions. There'll be people outside to do that. After that session, which should end around 1:15, lunch will be downstairs in level O, down the long wide hallway, I'm told, and into the large light rooms at the front of the building. We will not have a formal program at lunch, so you can set with whatever groups seem appropriate. But most important, please join me in thanking this really wonderful and inspiring panel.